Celebrating the life of an American hero. Today, thousands are paying their respects to John Glenn here in Columbus and across America. Good afternoon, I'm Katie Farrell. The dignified transfer of John Glenn's casket from the Ohio State House to OSU's Mershon Auditorium is about to begin. We have team coverage for you today. NBC4's Mark Taylor is at the State House where that procession will soon begin. Olivia Fecteau and Ted Hart are waiting along the route to the celebration of life. And our own Mike Jackson is standing by at Mershon Auditorium with former John Glenn staffer Dale Butland, who has so many stories. Here's the schedule of events for today. The dignified transfer is scheduled to start in 15 minutes at 12:15. It'll take about an hour and a half to make that 3.2-mile journey to Mershon Auditorium. The celebration of life service starts at 2 o'clock, and Vice President Joe Biden and the current NASA Administrator Charles Bolden are both expected to speak. Now, John Glenn served the citizens of the state of Ohio for more than 20 years as our senator, but his mark was made well before that when he piloted Mercury 7, becoming the first American to orbit the Earth. That journey into space at a critical time in our history turned him into an American hero. President Kennedy even would not let him take another flight for fear something could happen to America's most beloved hero. His passing at the age of 95 last Thursday closes the chapter on Ohio's foremost member of the greatest generation. In 2012, John Glenn actually sat down with our own NBC4's Colleen Marshall for an in-depth interview, and one of the things he talked about was how he should be remembered. Take a listen.
What do you want the John Glenn legacy to be?
You know, I'll leave legacies up to somebody else. I may be over 90. But that doesn't mean I've given up, and I think I invented another word the other day. I say instead of legacy, I like to think of it as a livacy. And I plan to be around a while. I haven't given up yet, and I think you keep going however not by what your calendar tells you, but by the way you feel. And that's sort of the way we've tried to run our lives.
And we will have more on Colleen's amazing interviews with John Glenn throughout the show. The fighter pilot, the astronaut, the statesman, the Marine has such a long list of historic achievements over his 95 years, both on and off this earth. NBC4's Mike Jackson is talking to friend and former assistant to John Glenn, Dale Butland, who I could listen to for hours. Mike.
Oh, without a doubt, Dale has a lot of stories. And, you know, Katie, for me, on a personal note, you know, John Glenn's accomplishments actually spans my lifetime. I'm part of that first generation that was able to watch his accomplishments in the Mercury program, which provided the foundation for the man-moon, the moon program that we had with Apollo. And also it showed us that a guy from modest means from Cambridge, Ohio, could achieve great things. I'm joined now by Dale, who's a former chief of staff and close family member. Dale, we were talking earlier, this is a funeral, but is a celebration of life, and I can't think of anything more appropriate for someone who's so deserving.
John would love this. He would absolutely love it. And by the way, one thing your viewers should keep in mind as they're watching this, all of the Marines who are taking part in moving his casket from the State House down here, at John's request, they are all enlisted men. There is not an officer among them.
There's a message there.
Absolutely, and he was a guy, when I worked for him, and I was so privileged to work for him for 20 years in the Senate. I remember when we would go to dinners, for example, big party dinners, John would never leave before he walked back through the kitchen to thank the cooks and the dishwashers and everybody else that made it possible. He truly was a man who never forgot where he came from.
The flags here at the Ohio State House all fly at half-mast right now. And if you take a look behind me, you can see right now we are waiting for John Glenn's casket to be carried outside. Then it'll be carried down High Street and to OSU for his funeral to start at 2 p.m. We are now going to send it over to Olivia Fecteau, who I believe is on High Street where that funeral procession is heading there. Olivia?
Yeah, Mark, we are just outside the Columbus Convention Center on High Street as we wait for the procession to come down up High Street into OSU's campus. You can see there are just a few people gathered here along High Street waiting for that procession. Of course, with the weather so bad, we have just now seen people start to come out here in the last few minutes. I talked to a gentleman earlier who's actually in town from Texas, not specifically for this, but he said it is such an historic event that he didn't want to miss it.
He was a pilot. After the Korean conflict, Glenn attended test pilot pilot school. He then joined the Naval Air Test Center staff of expert flyers. He served as a test pilot for naval and marine aircraft. He was also part of the test pilot team for a plane called the F-8U. It's one of the very first supersonic airplanes. It seems he had no fear. In July of 1957, he set the transcontinental speed record from LA to New York. He spanned the country in 3 hours, 23 minutes. And that was actually the first transcontinental flight to average supersonic speed. Quite the accomplishment.
It was a good thing. I'd like to repeat that one today. That was a project that was a lot of fun.
How fast did you go from New York to California?
Well, the other direction, California to New York.
Oh, it was California to New York.
3 hours, 23 minutes, 8.4 seconds.
How do you remember that?
It was easy.
It was easy, right? That was part of the conversation, the very in-depth and personal conversation our own Colleen Marshall had with Glenn back in 2012, right after he was awarded the Medal of Freedom from President Obama. That was such a beautiful moment and quite the accomplishment.
But it was like going on a combat mission. You know, you go on a combat mission, you're going to get shot at on almost every mission by anti-aircraft fire at least. You knew what the dangers were, but the advantages of going were like going on a combat mission. You're representing your country, and if there were some dangers, well, you accepted that. People often ask, were you afraid? Not afraid to the point where you let it interfere with what you were doing.
And it seems only fitting, I guess. He loved to fly. That Port Columbus in June of this year was finally renamed to the John Glenn International Airport, a ceremony he was able to be present for. So pretty exciting.
Well, I'm going to talk to a couple of ladies who are here to witness this as it comes up High Street. Ladies, turn this way a little bit. This is Lynn Radigan and
Nancy Griffith.
Nancy Griffith, both from Westerville. They decided to come down to watch this along with some others here on North High Street as it gets toward campus. You'd never met John Glenn, you were telling me. So what is it that gets you here today?
Well, I just think he's one of the iconic American heroes, from his World War II service to his astronaut days, time in the Senate. I just don't think they make him like that anymore. And so to me, it's just a privilege to be able to honor him this way.
Yeah, and this is a day for history here. I guess you as well?
Yes, to be this close to where history is being made, we just thought it would be wonderful to be a part of that.
Yeah, and they're not alone, although, as I've said, the weather probably is keeping quite a few folks home. But as I look here northbound toward campus, you can see some folks are out here on the street just waiting for John Glenn's body to pass by in the hearse and to be a part of this piece of history.
Our Colleen Marshall, back in 2012, she got to sit down with Glenn for a long, in-depth series of interviews. He opened up about everything, and we want to share now part of John Glenn's story and that conversation he had with Colleen. Take a look.
John Glenn can lay claim to a lot of firsts, and not just in the space program. He was the first and only Ohioan to be elected to 4 terms in the United States Senate. He served 24 years here. What is your proudest accomplishment in the Senate?
In the Senate? Oh, there were a number of areas. You can't say just one, I guess. I'd been through 2 wars when I got to the Senate, and I thought nothing could be more horrible than contemplating a nuclear war. And so I was going to join forces with whoever was working on nuclear non-proliferation, trying to prevent the spread of nuclear weapons around the world. And I got there and there wasn't much going on in that, so I think it's fair to say I became a leader in that area. And we passed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Act of 1978, and that's still the law of the land.
It's a privilege to say a few words in honor of our esteemed friend and colleague. There are those here today who have known Senator Glenn for 60, 70, or even 90 years. But most of us knew him long before we actually met him. We knew him through news reports and flickering images of events that were among the most spectacular we had ever witnessed. the suspense of the countdown, the majesty of the liftoff.
On behalf of President Obama and the First Lady, on behalf of the American people, Jill and I are here because we love you, Annie, and we love John. And together, you taught us all how to love. That's not something you usually talk about when you talk about heroes, especially heroes like John Glenn, who lived a life that was rigorous but tinged with just a little bit of magic.
We have learned that John Glenn himself requested that his memorial service end with mourners singing "Let There Be Peace on Earth." A beautiful tribute there. You have been watching live coverage of the funeral procession and the memorial service for Glenn. A beautiful service filled with music, pomp and circumstance, and memories of an American hero.
Godspeed, John Glenn.